All right, so what I'm going to demonstrate today here on the left is this idea of sort of a check-in survey that you can use if you have an iPad and you have an event. The iPad can just sit at the front and people can come in and they click on their name and register that they've attended this event. So when you click on the checkbox with your name, the name disappears. So as people check in, these names are disappearing. And then at the end, after everybody's shown up, you would just, whoever's running the front would just submit this, and then they would essentially get a checkbox, one record of the checkboxes that are all listed as who attended, and then they would just import that into a new or into their project. And I won't really go into that. The whole purpose of this demo today is to just show you how to build this and hide these checkbox options as you select them. So let me refresh this. And this is all using the REDCap CSS injector. So let me go to the configuration here, and I'll just delete the rules that I've created and then refresh, and I'll walk you through building this. This is how it would look.
Hey.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Matt, did you answer did you answer her question if they'd show up right away?
No, I didn't see it.
I was responding to another question. Okay, so show her what happens. I'm sorry. Just run back and show her what happens that if you click on something by mistake, what you can do.
Okay.
Yeah, so that it's easy.
Let me put the rules back. Oh, I'm one. So if you accidentally click on somebody and you want to put them back, you would just click on it again in that space and it would come back. Because all it's doing, the CSS is just changing the styling, so the border, the image, the text, the background color, all of that is just being changed to transparent, which makes it look like it's disappearing. So if somebody accidentally pushed on a name that wasn't theirs, they would just have to do it again. And you could probably put that in the instructions up here in the survey name, to make things clear. So let me go back to the regular display. And these names are broken up onto 2 lines just to make it easier. So what I did in the dashboard or the designer is I just added a break in between their names to help it flow better, because the name really isn't important. It's the ID that's going to be the important thing that you're going to export. So you can style this any way you want. So I just put an HTML break in here so that these are always on 2 lines. So that way whenever I condense the checkboxes, they're not wrapping weirdly. So I'm going to walk you through building this, and for anybody who's new here and joining us, the REDZone, one of the first things that I do when I have to design something like this is I open up my development panel in Chrome, but if you right click on the element that you're interested in and you click inspect, it's going to open up this panel, and you're going to see here that if I mouse over these divs that I'm picking these buttons. So the first thing that I need to do is add a rule for this this whole section here. So this is this question number column. We don't need to worry about that. But right here, this table data class down here, this is what I want to add my columns to. So if I go up here and add a new rule of columns and say 3, it's automatically going to give me 3 columns. And then I always like to put important on here. Now in this development mode, you can tinker with the styling, but it doesn't save anything. So if I refresh this, it goes away. This is just to help me figure out where I need to apply these style rules, and then how to build those rules. I build them in a separate sheet. And I have that sheet here. So you can see here the first thing that I have is to set the number of columns. So I'm going to grab that rule, and I'll go back to my external module setup here. And we're just going to add these one by one. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the columns. And I'll refresh, and you can see that the columns now are there. The other thing that I want to do is I want to add some styling. Like right now, the text, if you want to make it nice, you can use U of A colors, ASU colors, however you want to do it. Right now, this is the default styling for this. And what I want to do is I want to change the color of the border, I want to change the color of the text, and I want to change the color of the background of the button. And the other thing is I'm not worrying about the hovering, because on an iPad you don't really hover over something. On here you would, but on an iPad or a tablet you either push it or you don't. So I didn't worry about styling the hover. So right now what I'm going to do is just take this rule for the styling and go back into my injector tab and add this to the bottom. So now when we refresh, now I've got this color, it's green. This is the project that we're using. They have like a green color scheme, so I'm trying to match that similarly. And so then the next thing I want to do is add this styling. You can see here now that if I click on a drop down or a checkbox, all it does is change that little image. It doesn't disappear. So now what I want to do is I want to take I want to change the background to transparent. I want to change the border to transparent. I want to change the color, the background color, the font color to transparent, and then the outline color. So you can see here that there's this little outline that goes around the whole button when you click on it, and it's an outline color. So if I don't put that in there, and I'll show you this. So if I take out this outline color, now when I click on a box, the box is there, and the image is there, and I have to change the image there's another rule for the image down here for the background. But you can see now that like when you check on one, there's still a box, and then if you click on another one, that box goes away, but then there's always a box that's being selected. So we want to go back and put that color back in there, and let me just grab all these to make sure I'm getting everything. And then the next thing I want to do is there's a background image. So if we go to the Dev tab here, you'll see that there's a background image here in this rule. It's applying this enhanced checkbox unchecked image, and that's what this is. And so now with this next rule, I'm hiding that. I'm setting that background to none, so there's not going to be an image. I'm setting the border to none, which is going to be the border of this, because this is for the selected radio and the selected checkbox. In the span, and then this is the outline border. I'm setting that to transparent as well. So if I refresh this, they should all go away now. So basically what it is there's a div container. So there's this enhanced choice container, and then within that div container there's a label, and then within that there's a span, and the span is where the text is being stored. So if we hover over this, you'll see that there's a div that's the entire block. The label is just the inside part, and then the span inside of that is the image and the text. So you have to have rules that specify each one of those elements if you want the entire thing to disappear. And that's basically it for this demo, but if you'll notice up here, there is a gap where, let me find it on here. There we go. So you can see here that there's a gap up above, and that's usually where your field name goes. Right now I don't have a field name for this, it's just checkboxes, but REDCap puts an element there for you when you add a field name, that's where that goes. And so even though there's nothing there, it's adding a little bit of space for that, and so I want to get rid of that so that these buttons all line up exactly. So that's this rule here, and I have to, so guest underscore list is the name of my field, and there's a space up here for div space as well, because not only does it give you an element for the label, but it also adds a space in between fields. And so if we go back up to this one, let me find it. Right there. So you'll see here that there's a label, and then underneath it there's a div container that's a space, and REDCap puts that in there because it automatically just uses that to help space out elements. And so these two things I want to get rid of. And so with this next rule here, what I'm doing is I'm just saying display none. So it doesn't matter what size they are, I'm just taking them out so they're not even showing up on the page. So I'll put that ruled in down at the bottom. So now my elements are lined up correctly. Now the next thing is setting this background, because if you want it on a tablet, if you want it to look like one solid page, these two have a different background color. And when I click on here, you can see that now the background color here changed to green, because anytime in REDCap you're in a field, the highlighted field is green to let you know where you're at. And so we have to add a rule that negates this green highlight and also sets the background color for both of these, so that way when we look at it, it looks like one just solid list with little checkboxes. So this rule here is for the background, and we have to set it for this question number. If we look in the dev tab here, there's a question number column that's on the left, and we have to style that as well, because then there's two little columns where the checkboxes are and the question number. So we set the left and right columns, we just do the background color as white, and then here we're overriding the green highlight. So they're the same thing, but it has dot green highlight because there's a style for green highlight specifically applied. So anytime you're on a specific field, REDCap appends this attribute, green highlight, and that's how it knows what to style. So we're taking those two, and we're going to add them. So now when I click on this, you can see now we're not getting that green highlight, so everything stays white, and I can click all I want. Now the issue we have is there's all this white space up here, and there's this border that's separating our instructions from our checkboxes, and we want to get rid of that. So the border is actually in the form element. So if we go to the Dev Tools and I right click and we find the form element here, you can see that there's a border top of 1 pixel solid. So if I just uncheck that, the border goes away. And so that's how I know where I need to apply this rule. So you can see here it's form with a form class, a form ID. So that's the rule I have to make. And then up here, I'm just taking this padding So you can see that the orange box and the green on the sides, that's the margin and the padding that REDCap is adding. And so what I'm doing is I'm just shifting those values. I'm taking the bottom padding out. I'm adding some more to the top. I'm shifting it in a little bit. And that's all I'm doing is just to make it look nicer. So this is the top border to remove that. And then this is to adjust the spacing for the header. So now it looks a lot better. It looks like it's one cohesive unit. The other thing, the last change I did is there's still a lot of white space here between the instructions and the checkboxes that we don't really need. And what this is, you can see down here, this is the survey instructions container. So whenever you write the survey instructions on your survey settings, that's where those live. And so since we don't have survey instructions, we just don't want to see that. We can get rid of that little area and move the elements closer together. And so that's the last thing that I did, was hide the survey instructions. And there we go. So now we have a guest list that we can set up on a tablet for people to check in. And then we save that information and we can export it to another project. And I don't know if Sherry wants me to talk about that or not, but I can. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want me to go over or explain?
Yeah, why don't you explain sort of how this came up and what you can do with REDCap and what you can't. I'm sorry, I'm having some problems here. But yeah, I mean, this in and of itself is nice, but it's meant to integrate with another project. So why don't you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. So we have this...
Oh, wait 1 second. Wait 1 second.
Yep.
Tanya Zepeda, if you are still on the call, will you please check the chat window, please? Thank you. All right, go ahead.
No problem. So we have this other project where people are registering for a conference, and every time they register, it generates a record for their name, and gets a record ID. And there was no easy way to mark somebody as having attended this conference. She could generate a registration list based on the records in the project, but there was no easy way to just pull that information out. And she'd need to sit there with like a sign-in sheet and check people off, or do it in a different way. And so what we did was she added a field in her project that just says has attended or did attend, and it's yes, no. And so that's kind of how I base this off of, because if we go, so let me check a few more of these, and then we'll submit this as people have attended, just to give you an idea. So let me submit this, and then we'll close the survey. And now if we go to the record status dashboard, it should be this last one here. So we'll see, you can see the people who've attended. Now the problem is this is a check-in sheet that's in one project. You have your registration in another project. So what we do is just export this data out. And all this is doing is giving us a list of people, so we'll just delete these other ones. This is giving us a list of people who have attended with the guest ID of 1. So this guest ID 1, 2, 3, those would be the person's record ID. So what she would do is she would, after everybody's registered, she would give me the the record ID and the name, and I would build that checkbox list with their ID and their name, and then whenever I export it, their record ID would be here. And so I would have a list of all these people who've attended. Now what I have to do is convert it into a format where I can just import. And what I'm going to do is just delete these two because we don't need that. I'm just going to highlight these two rows and copy them, and then come back over here, and then we just transpose them and make a column for that. So now we have this guest ID list 1. This 4 is just a record number, but like you just replace that with the name of your field, attended, yes or no, and then we just highlight this. We don't need this completes record. And then all we have to do is change this to where it shows the record ID instead of guest list record ID. And so we'll just grab that, and then we're just going to replace it with nothing. So now we have a record set of these record IDs of the people who were registered for this event, and then the ones are the people who have attended this event. And so what you would do now is you would go back to your original project. I don't have that set up, but you would go back to your original project and just import this data. And for every record, so you go to George Washington's record here, now that field in his registration at the bottom that said, did he attend, yes or no, now that would automatically be checked as yes. And it would happen for all these other records. And all you have to do is just import this in. And the nice thing about this is you go back to your check-in. So the next event you have, you allow people to register. You grab that registration list from that project. You come in and you just update this checklist, because you don't need to keep this checklist. You don't have to have a running list of these. You can just come in and change these values after you've imported them into the project. You don't need them anymore. You can import. You can grab your next event, grab the registration, throw them in here, and now you have another check-in for another event. I mean, you could have multiple projects, but you could use this over and over and over again, and all you do is you just export the data out, import it back into your project, and you're updating your registration attendance, fairly easily, instead of having to have a sign-in sheet where somebody has to manually sit down and go through every record and check that they've attended, or even having a sign-in sheet at all. You wouldn't need that, because you would just be able to have people come in and do their own work, essentially. They just come in and find their name and click on it, and it's as simple as that. And Terry and I talked about what happens if somebody accidentally submits the survey. We could set this up to where you have a code when the save and return feature, and if somebody messes up, you just go to the link and go back to the original survey. You don't have to create a new record. You would go back to the first record that people have already entered data into, and you just bring it back up, and then people just continue from there. So is there anything else you want to add?
Questions? No, I just want to. The question had come up: is there a way that if you have a database of people for an event, and you're collecting a lot of demographic information, or some demographic information like address, institution, email address, all that kind of thing, and you wanted to have a check-in type electronic check-in that you could use on any kind of tablet, or you could do it on a laptop if it had touchscreen, anything like that. Was there a way for you to create a survey and then create this thing that Manuel's showing you? And the short answer is no. You can't create an instrument that pulls in all the all the options here, all the participants, all your records, into something like this. However, thinking outside the box, which is what I liked about this, it's just a matter of taking creating another project and capturing all the record IDs, which is key, and then tying in the names and creating checkbox fields with all that list. And you're just copying and pasting it. You export out a report of those names, and then you need to make sure that you capture how you want to sort them before you put them in as option button checkboxes in your survey in your second project. But the point of that is you have to take sort of the data out of your project into this like survey only check-in project, and then import it back in, but it works perfectly. And so if you're doing something where you have multiple, like the same event year after year, you know, all you'd have to do is build it once and reuse it. You just dump all the data that's in it and rebuild that checkbox field, and you're off and running again. So I just thought this was really cool. Very unique way of approaching it. Just understand that we did have to take it out, the data out, and then put it back in so that it met the needs of the overall registration process. So that's it. Of course, you know, I just thought the blanking of the names and all that was really cool. That way somebody can't like come in twice, or, you know, if you're printing off, you're trying to do some kind of check sheet of whether you've given out name badges or something. And the fact is that you can uncheck a box if necessary just to see if you've made a mistake. So anyway, there's a lot there, and not our standard kind of a demonstration. It's actually just a solution to a problem that a client had. So that's it for today, I guess. We're coming down to the wire. Unless we change our mind next week, will be a different solution to a problem that involves a few different components of modules and tweaks to a project. So we'll see. And thank you all for attending. Again, my loyal people. And if you have any questions, send it REDCap@email.arizona.edu.